Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Self, and welcome to Office Hours, a group coaching session for guiding your career in johngself.com. We are glad you're here. Normally, we're on Wednesday afternoon. We're normally on Wednesday afternoon at 4, but we're going to be shifting over to Thursdays for a while to see if that's a better time frame for everybody. So we're going now pretty much with Zoom into YouTube or Facebook, and we hope those are convenient packages for you to watch us on. Again, delighted you're with us today, so let's get started. I've had a great career. I spent more than 8 years in executive search, 8 years in career search. It's 27 years in executive search. I've interviewed 9,000 executives. I'm a pretty thankfully, I'm a highly regarded interview coach. I've had more than 10 years. I taught executive interviewing courses for a global professional association, and I successfully navigated 4 diverse career changes. So I also know a little bit about careers and career changes. And I really enjoyed my work as 8 years as a career guide. And so I'm not the ultimate authority, but I know a lot, and I'm delighted to share it with you. And now it does. Hi, it's good to see you. We were doing a restream, we couldn't use animated graphics, so we just decided to try this. So we're still learning. Learning is an ongoing process, and when came up in the print media and try to go to television or video, it's a little bit of a different kind of experience. Thanks for your patience. I'm having a great time doing this, and I hope that this information we're going to share with you is beneficial. You know, a lot of people don't really understand how the executive search process works. I was amazed throughout my career at how many executives who actually hired a lot of search firms didn't really know how the process worked when they were candidates. And so today we're going to really look at that. The process, what you don't understand about it, that can hurt you. So this is a presentation today to answer your questions and to, by the way, try to help you understand how it really works. Now, one of the things that really recruiters don't want me to say, but it's true, we're not all created equal, and I'm not one of them anymore. I certainly enjoyed my work as a recruiter for all those years, and I traveled all over, really globally, and I was glad to do that. But I absolutely, really, know that this is not getting my screen up here so I can answer any questions that come in. This is not exactly what happens for people. You know, they don't always understand it, and now that I've got that screen open, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and I'll try to answer them. Recruiters are not all created equal. So now we're back on track again. There are several kinds of recruiters. We're going to talk about that today. Anytime that you deal with a recruiter, whether it's corporate or an executive search firm or a placement agency, do your homework, ask the right questions. That's number 3 on our list today. And number 4, every interaction is a test for the current search, but also your future relationship with the recruiter. So, short phrase, don't burn a bridge. Well, here's the best thing I can say about recruiting. A transactional engagement is focused on contractual fulfillment. And that's the way a lot of search works. Transformational recruiters, and a lot of people like to say that now because it sounds a lot better, but transformational engagement is focused on the long-term results. Now, I like to think of myself when I was a recruiter as a transformational recruiter. Why? Because I was not worried about just filling the order based on what the engagement said and what the client was happy with. I was focused on, does this person have what it takes to deliver long-term value to the organization? That was what drove me. That's what satisfied me. And for the most part, on most of my searches, I mean, I only had, I think, 8 or 9 that I had to go back and redo. I never had to redo a CEO search. So I believe in transformational recruiting, and most of it, though, today is transactional. So let's talk about part number 1. What you don't know or what you don't understand can hurt you. First of all, recruiters, they can be the most affable people in the world. I mean, they can tell a good joke, they can buy a good dinner and engage in friendly conversation. And the whole time they're kind of trying to piss you, if you will. They're trying to extract information to try to find out who you know because they're already building a secondary reference list. So when you're having dinner with a recruiter or you're in casual conversation and they want to know who, oh, I know people there. Who did you work with? Be careful which names you give them because they may call that person when they do references as a secondary reference, not your prime references, to find out what they know about you and what they're willing to say about you. So you always want to share with the recruiter the people that you know like you and respected what you do. One of the things you need to understand about recruiters is they are not your agent and they are not your friend. They can be very friendly, they can be very helpful, and you need to listen to them, but don't think that because you had a good relationship with a recruiter, that gives you the inside track. Nothing could be further from the truth. Why? Because recruiters want to look good for the client. They want to look good for their industry. They want to look good, for their public brand, their public persona. So as a candidate, you need to try to help them look good. So you want to be helpful by delivering a values-based resume that's customized, that really speaks to their client's needs, or if it's an internal recruiter, the company's needs. And you want to be prepared. And I'm talking about really prepared for each interview. And that does not mean just reading the damn job summary. Nothing, that's not going to help you. So you need to really be prepared. You need to do your homework and you need to rehearse potential answers. But above all else, you need to play it straight. Everybody finally got the memo that you don't lie on your resume. And so that's no longer a big issue. Although when I started in career, when executive search, I even had people give me fake master's degrees that looked real and we had to go verify that it wasn't real. And, that was kind of irritating. Don't embellish. I know there's a lot of pressure to be competitive and there's a lot of pressure to differentiate yourself in the marketplace. Do that with your performance, not embellishments. Something like that could embarrass you or the recruiter. And let me tell you something. If you get caught embellishing and you embarrass the recruiter, they will quietly talk about you all over the industry. Recruiters are gossips, okay? And so they're not bad people, they're not unethical people. They don't go out of their way to hurt anybody. But if you make them look bad, there is a price that you will have to pay. Now, one of the other things that really makes the recruiter look good and feel better is you have references that are targeted based on the client's priorities. If you are an executive today looking for a job, let me tell you something. You're going to probably go through 4 or 5 interviews where they may check your references. So you can't just have 4 or 5 people because you're going to wear them out. And reference fatigue is a problem. So come up with 3 or 4 panels of 4 or 5 people each that can speak to various aspects of your experience. That's really important because you want a reference that can really answer the client's needs, can really speak to what the client's looking for, because that can help you close the deal. I can't tell you how many times our reference teams would talk to references and we'd ask them questions and they'd say, well, I can't speak to that. Well, I didn't know anything about that. That's not a good reference. He may say, Bobby Jack or John is great. I really liked him. He's a real hard worker. But if they can't speak to your accomplishments and can't speak to your value and how you were and how you achieved that, it's not a good reference. So you want to be sure that your references are really prepped to the job you're pursuing. And you want to have 3 or 4 panels of 4 or 5. Now, most recruiters say, send me 3 references. Okay, that's really great. And it's also pretty dumb. Here's why it's dumb. Especially a lot of recruiting occurs from, begin April, May through September, October. It kind of peters out in November, December. But so what happens in those months? You have college graduations, you have spring break, you have vacations. So you have people who they take some college professors or some people that you may know that know you well, maybe college professors. They are harder to catch in the summer. So you always want to have 1 or 2 more people than they ask for in case somebody's not available, that somebody's gotten sick, somebody's out of town. Don't delay the decision because your references aren't immediately available. What you don't know about recruiting can and probably will help hurt you. Okay, I've always believed this, interviewing is a two-way street, so that the dumb questions, the career limiting questions, are the ones you don't ask. And so many people are so afraid to ask questions because they don't want to appear to be dumb or stupid or look like they don't know anything in front of the in the eye of the recruiter. Do your homework. Do your damn homework and understand what the issues are, and then go get the answers. Understand what questions need to be asked. The recruiter's not going to think badly of you for asking questions. Some recruiters are not very professional. They may get impatient, and we can't help that. But you can't make a judgment, well, this guy may not like me asking questions. You got to do that. You have to do that. You have to be sure that you're getting the kind of information that will help you at the next stage of the interview process. The more information you are able to glean from step to step to step, the better you are going to be at the last interview. Now, be sure your resume and other public profile information is up to date. Recruiters look for consistency. So let me just use a healthcare example. If you have a membership in American College of Healthcare Executives, well, they have a rich, online presence with a full directory. And the directory that they offer has a profile of all the jobs you've had and the dates. And so if your dates in your LinkedIn profile and on your resume don't line up with the dates, none of them line up together, that creates a problem. And so we're looking for consistency. Be sure your resume and all the public information out there is consistent. Now, you have to understand that when a recruiter calls you, it's a special feeling. I mean, when somebody says, we're interested in you, that's heady stuff. But for the recruiter, the search is just one of dozens of transactions they'll handle each year. So you have to be very strategic with your relationship. Do not assume that the time you spend with a recruiter, the tone of the interview portends that you have an inside track, because that means nothing. Normally, you do not. So what you have to do is stay focused on what it takes to get to the next step in the process. You want to sell yourself. You want to be sure that you are constantly connecting their questions, your value, your successes with the client's needs. You have to be strategic with that relationship. You can't assume anything, because you know what? If they don't pick you this time, even though the recruiter may recommend you, the client doesn't always follow the recruiter's advice. So what you want to do is be sure that you're a good interview, that you are prepared, that you delivered the information, and they just decided somebody else met their needs. They were more comfortable with somebody else. What you don't want to do is get mad at the recruiter. What you don't want to do is leave that recruiter out to dry. That recruiter depends on repeat business and new business. And so you don't want to do anything to hurt their reputation, because they can turn around and hurt you by just ignoring you in the future. Or if they work for a big firm, you may suddenly find that big firm doesn't ever call you again. And so it is a self-serving point of view, but listen, it's also business. Now, again, do not assume that the time you spend with a recruiter, the cordiality, the engagement that you have, the friendly tone, that says that you have the inside track, because it really doesn't. And you cannot depend on that. Now, let's go to point 2. And not all recruiters are equal. There are 5 kinds of recruiters out there. One is a contingency recruiter. And if you're a supervisor or a manager, you deal with them a lot. They only get paid if the client hires the candidate you submitted. So there's a lot of aggressiveness to get your resume in first before somebody else. And so it's a battle. And they are trying to get you submitted quickly to establish ownership of your name. Because if they don't have ownership of your name, they don't get the fee. And if they don't make enough fees, they're going to get fired in their job. So it's an eat what you kill business. And so you have to understand that. The other thing you need to understand about contingency recruiters, you don't see them very much never see them in C-suites, but you will see them sometimes at the executive level, but mainly at the department director, management level, supervisory level. And they're not always going to have a lot of information on the culture of the client, or really the full details other than what the job summary says. And at that level, a lot of times the job summary is just pretty pathetic in terms of the detail. So contingency recruiters are speed recruiters. There are a lot of good people out there that work in that space. They like it, but it is all about being sure that you have a good relationship with the client. A lot of those people work on non-exclusive basis, so there may be 4 or 5 other contingency recruiters competing to fill one slot. Retain recruiters. That's what I was. And we are kind of like consultants. We get paid a retainer up front and our fee is guaranteed based on what we anticipate the salary to be. Now, some recruiters, it is not just what the anticipated salary is going to be, it is the total first year cash compensation. Let me explain that first. The anticipated compensation is really the base salary, and it's multiplied by 25% or 30% or 35%, whatever the firm charges. So you can see they charge some pretty good fees, plus expenses. And so that's one way. Another way is that they charge first year total cash compensation, which is, the salary and any anticipated bonus. So they calculate the fee based on the midpoint of the anticipated bonus, and then they break it down into 3 payments: the retainer, a midpoint, and a final payment. Now, at the end of the year, if the candidate, the successful candidate, exceeds the midpoint of the bonus, then the client owes the search firm more money. If it's the other way around, the search firm pays the client back. So, but that's how retained search firms work. They are exclusive to any engagement they take. They work like a consultant. They're typically going to have more information for you. They should have a better in-depth understanding of culture, of what the real true issues are, the hurdles to success, what the priorities are, etc. Then you have corporate recruiters. Now, this is number 3. A corporate recruiter is pretty self-explanatory. They work for the organization. Sometimes they work as an outsourced person, but generally they're an employee of the corporation. A lot of corporations now, when they're hiring less, they bring that position internally for almost all their executive and management searches, except for the C-suite. And these corporate recruiters, work internally in probably a department called talent acquisition. Sometimes that's under HR. Sometimes it's a standalone organization. And they basically fill a lot of orders from the corporation. Now, sometimes those are regional people. Sometimes they're at the national level. It's really hard to tell. Each company operates a little bit differently. They are the people who in the old days hated to steal employees from somebody else. So they were post and pray recruiters. Okay, they posted job listings and hoped they got good candidates because they were loath to call another competitor and steal their people. That's what retained recruiters do all the time. If you're a retained recruiter, you have to have larceny in your heart. So a corporate recruiter now, they are increasingly relying on LinkedIn super fast scanners to scan through thousands of URL profiles to look for people that will meet the specifications of a job. What corporate recruiters really get tired of are all these people who sit there and say, well, I'm going to submit online because something may work out. The problem is the ATS recruiter doesn't, ATS computer recruiter, kind of synonymous these days. The ATS computer scanning system doesn't understand that concept of maybe something will work out. So they get a lot of people who are not qualified, and that's the reason that's the reason now that 60 to 70% of all the better jobs are not listed online. Now, the 4th kind of recruiter is the good ones. They are people who have integrity. They will treat you with respect. They're good at communication. They will get back to you when they say they'll get back to you. And if they don't, they'll say, well, I haven't heard anything, but I wanted you to know. So they're conscientious. They try to hit the important communication points and other issues. And so those are good recruiters. They worry about, are you really the best fit? And they will spend some extra time kind of focusing on that. And then, of course, the logical 5th one, the bad recruiters. And there are far too many of those. And these are people who ghost you, who don't have the integrity or they're just slackers. They won't call you back if they got bad news because they don't want to have to deal with that. They shouldn't have to deal with that. But that's part of the job. It's part of the job. And so these people don't keep time frames. If they're a contingency recruiter, sometimes they'll take your resume for one job and then shop it in the marketplace just so they can make a placement fee. That's not really good for your confidentiality. So, you just have to be very careful. Contingency fees, again, there are a lot of great people in that segment, but when they call you and ask for your resume, just be sure that you say this is specifically for the job that you're recruiting me for. If you want to submit it anyplace else, you must have my permission. If they don't violate that, then you have an actionable cause. Now, it pains me to say this, but this is a truth. Recruiters are not always analytical or experienced in the industry or the segment they're covering. And I have seen some colossal cock ups when people took calls on a Friday afternoon from a company that was urgent, trying to find a solution. They had a big board meeting and they were in terrible financial trouble. The company was in distress. And somebody says, "Oh, I know so and so, and they're available and they'd be really good." And before you know it, by Thursday, the board's hired them. And the people who really understand the industry, maybe they were on vacation or holiday. And so those things happen. You'd think maybe they don't, but they do. They do. So when you're dealing with a recruiter, you might want to ask, tell me about your industry experience. Okay, that's a legitimate question. Don't hesitate to ask that, and don't take anything for granted. Do your homework. Ask the right questions. You thoroughly read the job summary. There's so many people that don't do that. So you got to ask the questions at each interview. The more you ask, the more you will know, and the better your answers are going to be. So you want to be very strategic in asking questions. And we have a whole list of questions that we're happy to share with you that you should be asking in the process. And it really should start the first time you get a call from a researcher or associate saying, we have this position. Would you be interested? And you can say, yes. Do you have a few minutes? I have a few questions. First of all, you want to find out if they're a contingency or retained firm or if they're corporate. That makes a difference. The second thing you want to do is tell me about what they're looking for. Ask about the compensation range. If they don't really know, then say, well, I'm really going to need to know that before we move too much further because I really enjoy my job here. I'm willing to look at something that offers me more advancement in my career, but I'm very careful about violating my confidentiality. Okay, that's a very legitimate point. You can also ask what the schedule is when they hope to make a decision. Ask how many times they've worked for that client before, because the more they've worked for them, the more they're going to know about the culture. Those are just some of the questions you should ask. Now, after the first reading of the summary, create your list of relevant questions. Look for the job summary keywords and priorities. Those are really important. And think about all the things you want to ask. Write them down. Don't expect to remember them, because the first time a recruiter calls you and says, "Hey, you've been selected for an interview," people get excited, and then lo and behold, they forget to ask their questions. The questions you don't ask can come back to bite you. So be very careful and be sure you're asking questions. Use connections and the internet for research to find out from other people what you should be looking for. Google industry, newsletters, and news outlets can give you some insight into the organization. One of the questions you want to ask, what happened to the person that had this job previously? If it's a new position, that's good for you to know as well. Colleagues who are market knowledgeable, you want to talk to your colleagues who have connections, who are market knowledgeable. They may work for suppliers or contractors. Those are good people. They can give you good information. You can also talk to government look at government or NGO reports and public records that can give you insights about the hospital's financial viability. If you're at the C-suite, you can look at the 990s under GuideStar and look at what the previous executive was making. Now, when you are interacting with a recruiter, you got to keep in mind Your relationship is for this search, but you're also trying to plan for the future. And you want to keep a good relationship for those recruiters in the future. They only handle about 30% of all the jobs, but when they get involved, it's a great job. It's usually a senior level position. So you want to nurture that relationship. You want for them to say, this guy really was a good candidate. He really did his homework. He really was on time. He really worked hard to make me look good. They don't say that, but as a recruiter, I can always tell you that the thing I love to hear the most from a client is, John, this is an incredible group of candidates. We're really impressed and we thank you. This is before they've hired them. So that's part of the chemistry. Understand that and learn how to use that in your favor. Now, do not avoid or dodge negative questions. Okay. If you got to show up on time, you got to be professional. You can't, if you're doing it online, dress as if you would meet with them face to face. And for God's sake, if you're online and you're wearing a coat and tie and short pants, if you have to get up, they're going to take a break, shut off your microphone and cut off the camera so that when you stand up, you don't destroy the image you've carefully tried to create. And don't avoid or dodge negative questions. I have had so many executives say, well, I don't like answering negative questions. You know what? I don't care whether you like it or not. I need to know this. Why do I need to say, tell me about your weaknesses? People, I've seen recruiters, not very good ones, I might add, say, that's the dumbest question in the world. Yet it's dumb because they don't like asking it. But let me tell you, if somebody doesn't want to talk about their weaknesses, that's a red flag. And so what you need to do is don't worry about talking about your weaknesses. Just have great answers prepared in advance because that's probably going to come up. And dodging and saying, well, I don't like to talk about my weaknesses is not the right answer. And recruiters don't like that. They want you to respect the questions they've asked because they've got a reason for asking them. And if you say, I don't like to do that, and I've had several people do that. This talks about your emotional health, your emotional intelligence. If you can't talk about your weaknesses, that says a lot about your leadership abilities. You also always want to connect your strengths and successes with the needs of the prospective employer each time you have the opportunity. You cannot assume that the client and the recruiter will make that automatic connection. Again, that recruiter may be doing 6 or 8 searches simultaneously with various associates. He's doing the end stage interviews. You have to work for it. Cannot assume that recruiter is going to be your champion, your agent. You have to sell yourself and you have to connect your successes with the need of the prospective employer. Repetition is important. You may have answered that question the first time. That's fine. Interview teams rarely talk to each other. So you want to be sure you keep repeating. When you get those questions, you want to keep repeating the process. Here's what I've done. Here's how I did it. And wrap it in a story. People don't remember facts and figures, but they do remember stories. And again, at the end of the day, to be successful, you have to prepare, and then rehearse. Number 4, every interaction is a test for the current search in the future. It says this is a continuation. You have 2 audiences, the recruiter and the employee's hiring authority, and you have 2 objectives. Number 1 is get the offer or impress the employer and the recruiters that you are a valuable resource worth pursuing in the future. Never, ever get angry because you were not selected. I know, I've been there. I've gotten angry. Why did you call me if you weren't interested in hiring me? And that line I used that line early in my career, and it just basically was a reflection of my ignorance of what the process was all about. And so you can't do that, and you can't get upset at recruiters because you didn't get hired, because they all are about trying to do what's best for the client. Sometimes the best thing for it's about, I delivered 5 candidates. They all met the client's responsibility. They accepted the panel and they made the wrong choice or they made the right choice. That's very transactional. A lot of times employers don't really want the recruiter to help them find the transformational candidate because they don't understand that dimension to recruiting. But it's very, very important. It's going to get more important. Do not assume, okay? Leave no doubt. I can't tell you how many times this has happened. They say that a salesman's biggest weakness when they're getting started is they do all this work, they finally get to the client, they get to the decision maker, and then they don't ask for the order. And I've had tons of sales trainers tell me early on in the career, that's what a lot of them do. That's a mistake they rarely make. The next stage is all they do is talk, 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 talk. And although in an interview, that's part of it, you got to use your words carefully and sell your value, but you also have to listen. You have to understand what the real priorities are, and you have to listen to what they're saying, because that's, if you keep connecting your strengths, your successes with things they need or things they're concerned with, that makes you a stronger candidate. So here's some takeaways. Be prepared. Remember, the recruiter wants you to look good. Today, successful interviews are not average for we're not looking for average. We're not even looking for good. You must be great or you must be elite to succeed today. If you're in today's job market, you got to be great at the interview or elite. Don't assume that you're great, because most people are not. And I've got enough experience under my belt to know these are not people who are not well intended. Some people do their homework, but it's not just those two things. You've got to learn how to tell your story in a compelling manner. And that's one of the things we do in our company. We teach people how to tell their stories more effectively, how to communicate their value in a more compelling way. And so we have several programs to do that. The other thing we do is we want you to forget about friendship or the friendly tone of the interviews. This has thrown so many candidates for a loop, and you don't need to put yourself in assuming that, because then when you are told no, it puts you into a deep funk. And right now, rejection is one of the biggest problems candidates are having. After they've been rejected 5 or 6 times, some of these people have never really had this much trouble in their life finding their next better job. But this is a different time. We're in a unique market, and we don't have that many jobs available. So, those atmospherics of how you were treated and how friendly they were and how many people you knew together, and they knew your former boss and really respected him, that's all great. But in this market, it's all about the value and what the client wants. At the end, if it's an external recruiter, their career, their reputation, and the bonuses will win out every time. Now, there are times when recruiters will go to bat for you, and there's times that the client will listen. But that's not always the case, as I learned in my own career. Third, an interview is not a question and answer session. Everybody thinks that's what it is. First of all, an interview is the most complex, unique form of business communication. It is a challenge. And most people, as I said earlier, aren't that good at it. They're good, but they're not what they need to be today in a competitive environment, which is great or elite. So you have to continually work to understand the talent of connecting your strengths and past successes with the needs of the client. You have to educate and inspire, because they're going to make a decision based on the fact that they believe you're the solution. They like you, they trust you, and you touch their emotional button that they can trust you. They can trust you. They believe in you. They see you working side by side with them. That's what's going to trigger a decision. And so these are our takeaways, and we hope that they're helpful. So number 4, do not show your frustration or be too eager. This is another problem people have. They demonstrate your interest in a measured way. If they don't call you when they said they were going to call you, don't send a snarky email or even a nice email that says, you said you were going to call on Friday but didn't. Excuse me. Don't do that. Give them time. The search is never going to go as fast as you want it to go. And number 2 is the external recruiter or even the corporate recruiter, they don't always control the time frame. So be understanding. There are certain ways that some people, they try to submit their references up front. The reference, when they request the references, that's a great checkpoint for you to know how the search is going. If they're asking for references, that means you're still in play. So that's one way to kind of keep tabs on what's going on. But don't bombard them with questions, because that's they're probably going to say, geez, this person's got no confidence. They're insecure. They're too needy. We don't need them. Okay, now, number 5, be prepared to answer tough questions. You hope they don't ask. And what I'm talking about here is short tenures, sudden resignations, or long gaps in your resume. And we've all made mistakes. And, and Bum Phillips, the old Houston Oilers coach, and if you know, many of you know me, I've used this before. He was on the Tonight Show one night. He had been fired unceremoniously after his team lost in the championship game with a bad call from a referee, and it's the second year it happened. And he came back to the Astrodome, and there were 50,000 people screaming and yelling, and the buses came out onto the field, and everybody was welcoming him home because they were proud of the team and they were proud. They liked their coach, and he got fired the next day. And Johnny Carson said, that must have hurt. He said, Johnny, Bum Phillips said, Johnny, in the NFL, there's two kinds of head coaches, them's that's been fired and them's that's going to be. In healthcare and a lot of other businesses, you're going to have changes. You know, the Methodist Church pastors change every 3 to 4 years, whether they need to or not. And churches are political. City councils, city managers are political. Chamber of Commerce positions can be political. So, you know, there are a lot of people that have had short tenders or sudden resignations, and some of them have even had long gaps in their resume. In today's market, again, it's 8 to 14 or 15 months to find your next better job. It's taking longer for some people than it's ever taken in their lives, and that's really weighing heavily on the people. So when you get to the interview table, you got to be prepared, and you got to understand there may be some questions you don't want to answer, and you're scared that they're going to ask. Be prepared. If you got fired, write a good answer. Don't dwell in the mistake. Just say, let me tell you what happened. Smile and say, and now let me tell you what I learned from that. These people have you there on video or in face to face because they're looking for a reason to hire you. So if you're honest, if you're straightforward, you're not snarky, you're upbeat, you say, I made a mistake and I learned from it. And here's what I learned. And you don't ever have to worry about that happening here. Those are ways. They may never ask that, but because you have an answer ready, you're going to feel more comfortable. You're going to feel more self-aware. And when that happens, you can have a better chance for being a good interview. And that makes a recruiter very happy because they want to look good. 6, the process, as I've said several times, will never move as fast as you want it to. Don't be too aggressive with a recruiter or remind them of missed deadlines. You know, they don't always control their response. And let me tell you something. That doesn't make them happy when you remind them. Even if they're derelict in getting back to you, even if they're sloppy, don't remind them. There's no gain for you in that. So we want to finish up today telling you a little bit about a program we have to help you get access to our kind of resources, our coaching at a discounted price. It's called Your Career Community. It is a membership subscription community, and we hope you'll give us some consideration. Thank you for joining us this week, everybody. We look forward to seeing you next week, Tuesday on Lunch and Learn at 12 noon Central Time on Tuesday, and we'll be announcing the content for that coaching session next.